That's all he's bothered about, is getting past you, anywhere, at any place, at any time. You can bet he's the boy who's going to go flashing past with the throttle wide open. And you can bet he's the boy in 6 months who's going to be in a coffin.
Yes, really, I was a ton-up boy.
When you was a ton-up boy, it was Speedo. You looked at the Speedo 90, 91, and it gradually crept up 100 mile an hour, and then you think, I've just done a ton, you know, and that made the day, because you did a ton.
I had a BSA Gold Star that was actually a clubman's racing bike with lights on, and it's what I started racing on. But I had a younger sister who would be 5 or 6 years old, and I used to go and pick her up from school. You've got the rev counter and the speedo on the BSA like that, and she's watching it, and she goes rushing into her mum, saying, "Mummy, Mummy, we did 100 miles an hour." My mother went mad.
There was another strand to rocker life. Some of their hangouts were notorious for being as rough as their leather jackets. The Chelsea Bridge Boys were an infamous band of rockers who gathered next to a tea kiosk.
It was notorious in the 50s and 60s as a place of ill repute. You didn't go up there, and if you did, you was bad. You was deemed to be a bad boy, or people wouldn't even walk over it. And if you had a scooter boys wouldn't ride over there, because if they did, the scooters got thrown over Chelsea Bridge.
It was hardly Hell's Angels stuff, but always central to the action at the bridge were the motorbikes they doted on. It was these that delivered the real thrills, spills and adrenaline.
It weren't just about having fights and like being yobs. I mean, we was, and we did, but it was more, for us, it was more like the thrill of getting on a motorbike and riding it and opening the throttle and going as fast as you can and going into a bend and getting it just right and coming out the other side, and you think, wow, it was just a buzz. That was a common denominator. We all felt that.
Although they rode whatever they could afford, second-hand or perhaps new on HP, café racers favoured a certain type of bike. They were influenced by the styling and look of TT racers who, like them, raced on roads. But racing bikes traditionally used single-cylinder engines. For rockers, it was twin-cylinder engines that offered them what they wanted: quicker acceleration and performance geared for the streets.
Twins were generally associated with rockers. Ton-up boys and rockers, generally. Because you could tune them and go much faster.
Triumph had set the standard. Their chief designer, Edward Turner, developed the Triumph Twin before the war. And through the 1950s, they released bikes with sporty, American-tinged styling. Their finest hour was with the T120 Bonneville, launched in 1959. Named after a Triumph speed record set at Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah, it was the bike to be seen with, featuring dual carburetors and era-defining cool. The ton-up boys loved it. In the same year, motorcycle sales hit the roof. Café racers may have been setting the fashion for quick and stylish machines, but the bike industry only had eyes for lucrative American exports. Young riders found they had to customise these designs to make them their own.
At no time did any of the manufacturers, the Triumphs and Nortons and whatnot, ever look to the youngsters and ask them what they wanted. The kids bought the machine and then adapted it to how they wanted it.
It's very seldom I'll have a bike more than 6 months. I prefer to chop and change, rebuild. As a hobby, I don't keep them just as a form of transport. They are a hobby with me. I like to have a bike, and when I've got the maximum performance out of that bike, I'd rather sell it than keep it and install on something else.
People could think that they were Jeff Duke or whoever their particular Norton hero was, John Surtees, whatever, by dropping the handlebars and putting the footrests a bit further back and getting down to it.
Head down, arse up. It was a best position to be in, A, for aerodynamics, and B, to keep control of the bike. If you went into a bend and then you got it a bit wrong.
With a fine weekend, a powerful motorbike and a girlfriend on the back, the ton-up boys set off. 2 short days for riding high and fast, to wind and weave, and often to be a menace.
Huge progress comes about as a consequence of the pursuit of speed, but it does come at a price.
Café racers were paying with their lives. In 1960, nearly 14,000 riders under the age of 24 were killed or seriously injured.
He rode into the night, accelerated his motorbike. I cried to him in fright, don't do it, don't.
One lad that lost his leg. He went on the inside of a coach. The coach was turning left and so was he. It literally, as it swung in, and he ran over his bike and took his leg off.
Underlying the mythical tales of teenage road races was a harsh reality. On the roads around the Ace, the casualties started to mount up.
On racing Easonbridge and back, I'd do 90 mile an hour around there. And some didn't come back because, you know, Easonbridge, it was a well-known place. You could try and take it flat out there. Is it possible?
With the volume of traffic growing and the roads not modernised, there was a wave of popular feeling that this was no longer fun.
Please wait at the gate of heaven for me.
Absolute carnage on the road. The casualties went up and up and up. The pursuit of speed at one level was regarded as a noble cause, but for the mass of society, it's often regarded as a threat and a challenge.
The public backlash was keenly felt by the rockers.
We go into cafes and places like that, and no leather jackets. There wasn't many places we could go to, so as a consequence, we ended up in less than desirable places. We were just like anybody else. We wanted to hang around with blokes who had the same interests as us. Simple, you know. But because of the reputation, I guess our dress mode and the noise of the bikes and the aggressive way we used to ride, it kind of like all melted into a picture which wasn't too appealing to the normal decent people back in them days.
The powers that be were worried, but the establishment hadn't given up on them just yet. An inspired group of vicars had an idea to try and bring the café racers back into the mainstream. In 1962, the Reverend Bill Shergold would make a journey to the infamous Ace Café. His mission, to try and tempt the wayward youngsters to come to a new youth club and escape unscathed himself. So he plucked up his courage and set off on his motorbike into the unknown. He wrote, "I wrapped a scarf around my neck, covering up my dog collar. About a dozen bikes, ridden by sinister-looking figures in black leathers, roared past in the opposite direction. I felt almost sick with fear. I was in such a panic that I opened up the throttle and fled past the Ace as fast as I could." This wasn't where you'd expect to find a vicar.
Anywhere where motorcyclists gathered was a place where normal people, respectable people wouldn't go.
A few weeks later, he tried again. He wrote, "I entered the forecourt at the Ace. It was packed with bikes. Hundreds of boys were milling around, laughing and talking. This is it, I thought. I shall almost certainly lose my trousers or end up in the canal." Yet gradually they were won over by Shergold and his inclusive, non-judgmental style.
Although this is a church club, its purpose is to bring together young people with a common interest, motorcycling.
Their shared interest convinced the rockers at the Ace that the 59 Club was somewhere worth the look. As well as a new place to meet, it organised rallies and ride-outs, even activities like sub-aqua diving. Bikers joined in their thousands, and the 59 Club became the biggest motorcycle club in the world. For those who joined the 59 Club, it meant more than the establishment could ever have dreamed.
My first moment or night of going there was definitely for me life-defining. It really was. And it kept me on a path within motorcycling for the rest of my life, really.
But it was still somewhere the rockers and ton-up boys could revel in their lifestyle. By the mid-1960s, though, that lifestyle was under threat. Rock and roll seemed to have had its day. A younger generation was coming through that did things very differently. They became known as mods, famed for their love of sharp suits instead of leathers, coffee bars over transport cafes. They wanted soul music, not rock and roll, and worst of all, from a rocker's point of view, scooters, not motorbikes.
How would you explain this fanatical devotion by scooter enthusiasts for their gleaming machine?
You kind of like got the fact that they were good for riding on and wearing decent clothes, but it's a mod. How can you get pleasure from riding it, do you think? They're like little air dryers, you know, you just, how can you get pleasure from it? It was alien to us.
Mods represented progress, with their Italian scooters, a more international outlook. Rockers and motorbikes were being left behind as the rest of Britain moved on. Mods were looking to the future, and tension between the two saw things turn ugly.
If you get into a fight with a mod, you've got to watch it all the time, you know. They'll pull your hair, they'll claw at you.
They started, you know what rockers are like, don't you?
It really has come to something when people can't take a short holiday without the threat of long-haired youngsters with knives indulging in an orgy of hooliganism.
Only a handful of clashes happened between mods and rockers at seaside resorts like Brighton, but it was too late. The press and polite society had their pantomime villains.
Adolescents on motorbikes became identified with thugs. They rubbed in prejudices against motorbikes that many people have always had about them. The noise, danger, the dirt and the discomfort. The rockers' misbehaviour amounted to a knockout blow to the prestige of the two-wheeled machine in this country.
What do you think about society?
I don't know, it don't bother me.
As the media fretted about delinquent youth, the mystique was fading fast from British motorcycles. The industry began losing its battle against a flood of Japanese imports rising throughout the 60s. These were humdrum practical machines designed for commuters. Bikes guaranteed to get you to work rather than get you excited.
British bikes had this thing called character, which is a euphemism for being not very reliable.
Yet what couldn't be taken away was the spirit of fun, coolness and rebellion that British bikes had represented to the world for so long. It's no accident that whilst rockers struggled to find a place in 60s society, their style and attitude became legend. The motorbikes they blasted through the streets on are still lusted after. And even 50 years later, have a look all of their own. The restless energy of Lawrence, the bravery of TT racers, and the individuality of the ton-up boys took a utilitarian form of transport and gave it a very British take, a full-throttle affair.
You couldn't really put it in words, it was just such a fantastic feeling.
And there's more Time Shift here on BBC4 next Monday at 9 with When Coal Was King. Next tonight, though, we're staying on the bike for a race out on the open road and how the North West was won.
We can't make